Welcome back to RxMuscle's Iron Road to the Olympia 2019, brought to you by Chemical Warfare. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's guest is going to join me with a historical look back at previous Olympias. This is going to be part one of probably several parts that we'll be doing over the course of the next couple of months. Of course, he's our good friend and historian in bodybuilding, John Hansen. Welcome back.
Thanks, Dave. Great to be here.
John, whenever we talk history of the sport of bodybuilding, especially when Chris and I talk about it on the radio, I'm always like, we got to ask John Hansen. And usually, I know you listen to all the shows, all the radio shows, so you always wind up texting me the next day and filling us in on whatever we didn't know usually.
Right.
So, you kind of approached me about this. I said, this would be a great idea. We should really, given the fact that the Olympia is coming up in less than 2 weeks, we should really, let's take a look back at some of these previous Olympias and maybe, do this as a regular type thing, because a lot of people, they kind of know who won, but they don't really know the story behind who won and what happened. And there was a lot of drama in a lot of Olympias. People think like this year's Olympia is the most crazy of all time. There's no way this one was, but people forget what happened. They only know who won the show.
Right, exactly.
Now, I would like to believe that you were at all Olympias, but you weren't. Which ones did you actually go see in person? Do you remember?
Yeah, the first one I saw was 77, which was the one Zane won. I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And then I saw 78, I saw 79. So I saw all three of the ones that Frank Zane won.
Right.
1980 was in Australia, so I didn't go to that one, of course. But then 81 I did see. That's the one that was Franco won.
Where was that one?
Columbus.
Okay.
Went back to Columbus, yeah. Then I didn't go for a few years. I think the next one I saw was 86 that Lee Haney won.
Right.
It was his third one. And then I saw 90 because that was in Chicago, and I saw 96 because that was in Chicago, and I lived in Chicago at the time.
Right.
But those first three were great though. Those one Zane, and then of course the one Franco won. Those four were really great.
And back when you saw them, no one knew who won for months afterwards. So it was really a privilege to go see the show,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There was no internet. There was no nothing. There was no way to find out,
Yeah. I used to do what you did, call Gold's Gym on Sunday morning. That poor guy at the front desk.
I know.
500 people who the top six were,
And they didn't even have answering machines back then. But they could have put like a recording on them. There was you had to call and get a live person there.
Right.
So, today we're going to look back at the 1980 Olympia, which is when Arnold made his comeback and won his 7th Mr. Olympia. And then we're going to look at 81, the year after that, the year Franco won his only Olympia, his only overall Olympia, I should say. And the reason I'm doing this is because, obviously in lieu of the fact that Franco Columbo passed last week and he's no longer with us, I think it would be interesting to see, why he only won one Olympia and what the story behind it was, because a lot of people didn't know that he had a really severe injury that took place. So, let's talk about his injury and then we'll talk about the 80 Olympia, because Franco was involved, and a lot of people don't realize this, in the World's Strongest Man competitions back then were like, on, what was it, NBC Sports, something like that?
I think it was CBS.
CBS. So they would get like the strong men, they would get football players, they would get anyone who they thought could lift anything. There was no strong men like there is today.
Right.
And so they would get, Lou Ferrigno would be in it, Franco Columbo, and they had a crazy, who came up with this crazy event where they had to carry a refrigerator? Except, in today's world, World's Strongest Man, you'd be carrying a refrigerator, but it'd be in a harness and everything. It would be like a certified piece of equipment. They actually were carrying refrigerators back then.
Right.
And Franco was short, running with this refrigerator, and his knee buckled. And do you know what the extent of the injury was?
I heard that he tore every tendon and ligament off his knee.
Oh my God, that must have been brutally
There's a
painful.
picture on the internet, if you can find it, where you could see his leg is at like a 90-degree angle, like the knee went out, and it like cracked in half. Yeah.
I can't even imagine the pain he must have felt, with that. And
did you know I was at that World's Strongest Man contest?
You were?
Yeah.
Where was that held?
That was in Universal Studios in California, in Southern California.
So you drove out there, or would you fly out there?
No, it was a total freak thing. I was 14 years old, and it was the summer of 1977. And my parents, I had a really great family. My parents were real great. So my mom and dad wanted to go on this month-long trip.
Oh my God.
Take me and my brother and my sister. So we drove everywhere. We had a big van. So we drove from Chicago. We went all the way out west through all the states. We went through Colorado. We saw Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. And we got to California, and we got into San Francisco and then went down to Southern California. And when we were in Southern California, they were going to go to Universal Studios.
Right.
So I had been into bodybuilding for about a year. I was buying all the magazines and everything, and I knew what Gold's Gym was. I bought the book Pumping Iron.
Right.
I actually saw the movie Pumping Iron in the theater that year because that's the year it came out.
I was in first grade, by the way. Yeah, but go ahead.
Thanks. So I knew all these guys, and as we're on our way to Universal Studios, I told my dad, I said, hey, I want to go to Gold's Gym. Can we go to Gold's Gym? It's right in the area. It's in Venice Beach.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we don't have time. We're going to Universal Studios all day today, and then tomorrow we're leaving for Las Vegas. We were on this itinerary.
Right. It was like National Lampoon Vacation. You're like,
yeah. So we pull into the lot. I'm all bummed out, because I really wanted to go to Gold's Gym. I really wanted to see these guys.
Of course.
I read Muscle Builder every month. I was reading about Gold's Gym. So we pull in, and there's this big
John,
sign.
where was Gold's Gym then? It wasn't in the location it is now in Hampton, was it?
I think they might have moved it to Santa Monica.
I think it was in Santa Monica. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So they had this big sign outside, and it said, today filming the world's strongest man. So my mom goes, oh, well, maybe you'll get to see some of those bodybuilders here. And I go, nah, it's just going to be a bunch of fat power lifters and weightlifters. So we park the car. We start walking in, and there's the place where you get all the tickets. And as we're walking in, there's a spot over to the left where they had it roped off, and they had picnic tables.
Right.
And everybody's eating lunch. I thought it was like for the employees or something.
Yeah.
So my younger brother, Don, he stops and he goes, hey, John, there's Arnold. And I look around, and there's Arnold sitting at a bench.
No
He's
way.
got a blue Gold's Gym shirt on with a hat and shorts, and he's with the chick, and he's with another guy.
Yeah.
And we go over by the rope. I'm 14 years old, and we're like, Arnold! And he looks at us like, who the fuck is this,
Yeah.
So then we see Lou Ferrigno walking around, and he's huge. He's like 280.
Wow.
He's got like a tank top on. He was getting ready for the Olympia that year. He didn't know the Hulk thing was coming up. This is before they announced the Hulk thing.
Gotcha.
So we call him over, and he comes over, and he signs an autograph. We used to always get autographs back then. We took a picture with him, and my mom's like, we saw you on TV. We really like, because he was in that Superstars competition the year before.
Right.
So he was really nice. And then we saw Franco, and me and my brother just said, fuck it, let's jump the rope. So we jump the rope, and we go over by Arnold, and I take a picture of Arnold, and he goes, you guys can't do this to me. I'm in the union. So I got his autograph, and I wish I would have took a picture with him. I just took a picture of him.
Do you still have that picture to this day?
Yeah, I still got that picture.
That's great.
And I got the picture with Lou. I got a picture of him and me and Lou.
Right.
And then I went over by Franco, and Franco had these green shorts on. He was real muscular and thick, just like you see in the magazines. His abs was poking out and everything. And I asked him, I go, Franco, what's going on here? And he tried to tell me, but his accent was so thick I couldn't even understand him.
He couldn't understand what he said.
So then, of course, we stayed and we watched the event, and that was the one they were pulling these trams, like the trams that they use for the tours, I guess, at Universal Studios. So they had a harness, and they were pulling it. And Franco didn't do that good with it because he wasn't heavy enough, but Lou did pretty good.
Yeah.
So he must have hurt his knee that week because I think they filmed all the events that week. So I just missed it. It must have happened like a day or two later.
Who won that World's Strongest Man? You remember?
Yeah, Bruce Wilhelm. He was a weightlifter.
Yeah.
He's kind of a big mouth. He was always putting down the bodybuilders.
Yeah.
But,
who else was in it? Any other big names that year?
I think John Cole was in it. I think he was a powerlifter. Ken Patera.
Ken Patera, yeah. Very good lifter.
Yeah.
Strong, world,
I think Mike Dayton was also in it. Remember Mike Dayton? He used to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah, I don't remember that one, but I remember Ken Patera was a great power lifter,
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was great. It was an awesome event. But that convinced me, Dave, to be a bodybuilder because I was like, what are the chances of beating the three greatest bodybuilders in the world totally by chance?
At 14.
I didn't plan it, and I was like, I couldn't wait to get home to start working out. If I could,
and that's when before Arnold was that was before Arnold was a big star. So you could actually, there was no bodyguards and stuff like that. He was just chilling out.
Yeah, he just done Pumping Iron and Stay Hungry. That was it. It was like 5 years away from doing Conan yet.
That had to be amazing. So Lou Ferrigno was set to do, like you said, the Mr. Olympia that year because Arnold was retired.
Right.
And he was going to be the next guy to win, right? I mean, that's how it was built, I assume.
Well, it looked like it was going to be between him and Robbie. You know, I was reading Muscle Builder every month, and Robbie was getting bigger and more ripped every month. You know, because like you said, we only had the magazines back then.
Sure.
So I couldn't wait to get that new issue. And every month, there were more pictures of Robbie, and I'm like, holy shit, this guy's unbelievable. You know, he's getting better and better every month. Right. But then by the time he got to the Olympia, he kind of burned out, and he was holding water, and he wasn't as impressive as he was in the magazines.
Right.
And then Lou, I think 1 month before the show, Lou got a call from NBC or whatever it was, and they said, we want you to be in this Hulk movie. And at first, the Hulk was just a made-for-TV movie. It wasn't a series. But then the movie got such good reviews. He thought he was just going to do this movie and then go back to it the next year, go back to Olympia the next year. But then they ended up making it a series, and then he was stuck in it for 6 years.
Which wasn't really stuck. I mean, he was making good money, and he made him a celebrity, essentially. Arnold obviously went on to do a couple movies, but then Arnold was training for Conan the Barbarian in 1980, and he decided to. You think he knew the whole time he was going to do the Olympia, or do you think?
I think it's kind of like when he announced for governor. I think he knew the whole time. He just didn't tell anybody, you know.
Yeah. So he showed up at the show. Where was first of all? Give us the whole scenario behind the Sydney, Australia. Olympia.
Well, when Arnold retired in 1975, that was the one that was filmed for Pumping Iron. Him and Jim Lorimer made a partnership, and then they announced that the following year they were going to start promoting the Mr. Olympia. So then in 1976, him and Jim Lorimer promoted the first show in Columbus, and it was a big hit. Like, you know, I don't know if you know this, Dave, but they never opened up the prejudging to the audience before. If you remember of him Pumping Iron, there's just a few judges and then a few people from the press and the other competitors. That's the only people that were in the audience. So Arnold said, why don't we open up the prejudging to the audience and we'll charge them? So that was the first time they did that, and the show was a huge hit. It got rave reviews from all the bodybuilding media. And then they held it in 77, 78, 79. They had television coverage. They had ABC Wide World of Sports in 77 and 78. And then CBS did a 3-year contract with them where they were going to film the Olympia exclusively 79, 80, and 81. So in 1980, they decided to let Paul Graham from Australia promote the show. So now for the first time since Arnold retired, he wasn't going to be promoting it. So that summer, he starts training very seriously at World's Gym. Him and Franco and Joseph Wilkoch from Germany, they were all working out together.
Yeah.
And then people were like, you know, man, what's going on with Arnold? Is he getting ready for the Olympia? Because he's not promoting it this year.
Yeah.
He said, no, they're going to finally start filming Conan. So in 1977, Arnold signed the contract to do Conan, but it took like 3 years before they finally got it rolling. You know, they were going to have another director. I think Oliver Stone was supposed to direct it at first. Wow. And then they were supposed to have Raquel Welch and Sean Connery were supposed to be in the movie, and then that dropped out.
Oh.
So then John Milius signed on to direct. So they were finally going to start filming it in October of 1980. They were going to film some scenes where Arnold was going to be the King Conan. Remember in the beginning of the movie where he's sitting on the throne with So he had to get in shape. He had to get bigger because he got real small between 75 and 80. He was doing a lot of running, obviously not doing anything, and you know he just got a lot thinner. So that's the reason he said he was getting in shape. And then the story was that Franco tried to convince him, and he said, man, just go in and win it. Just go in and win the show.
Yeah.
So he never told anybody. And then, of course, Frank Zane used to go to Arnold every year before the contest, and he would pose for Arnold.
Right.
And he'd say, what do you think? And Arnold would always give him good advice, you know. So then that year, Zane poses for him, and he got hurt in that accident. I don't know if you remember that accident. He was sitting on a lawn chair by the pool.
Yeah.
And the chair collapsed, and he cut his urethra.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Right between, yeah. And it was really bad. He lost a lot of blood. They rushed him to the hospital. He spent a few days in the hospital. And Zane's challenge was always being big enough. You know, he was always ripped, but his challenge every year at that Olympia was adding a couple more pounds of muscle so he could win the contest. So he lost a lot of weight, and the contest was coming up, and then he posed for Arnold, and his main question to Arnold was, do you think I should still do it? You know, I'm the 3-time champ. I'm coming back as the defending champ. I don't want to risk losing. Do you think I'm good enough to win? And Arnold said, yeah, I think you could still win it. You know, I think you should do it. And then Zane said, well, what about you, Arnold? I heard rumors you're doing it. And he said, no, I'm just doing the commentary for CBS television. I'm not competing in the show. So that was Arnold's excuse for getting in shape, was he was doing the commentary for CBS. But the year before, when it was in 1979, Arnold was the commentator. And when Frank Zane came backstage, he goes, Frank Zane, you just won your 3rd Olympia. Congratulations. How do you feel? And Zane said, great, Arnold, almost as good as the time I beat you.
Oh, no.
And he beat him way back in 1968. He didn't say that, you know. And
Arnold off.
He's like white. He couldn't believe it. So Arnold was really pissed off, and he actually called Zane up. And he was pissed off about it, and Zane said, oh, yeah, Arnold, you can poke fun of other people, but when the shoe's on the other foot, you don't like it too much, you know.
Zane never thought Arnold would come back now, right? Or maybe he thought he couldn't beat him if he would come back, you know.
Yeah. So the other guy, too, was Mike Menser. Arnold and Mike Menser didn't like each other at all, because after Arnold retired, Menser's star really took off. He started getting more popular. He was in Weider's magazine every month. He was the editor-in-chief for Joe Weider's magazine. So he was writing articles every month, and he got a lot of magazine exposure. And he started this whole heavy-duty course, and his whole concept, of course, was less volume, more intensity. Right. And whenever he did his seminars, he would always bring up Arnold. And he would say, you know, Arnold looks the way he does because he's genetically gifted. Right. But he said if he would he's training wrong because he's training so long. Yeah. Because if he trained like me, he would be a much better bodybuilder. So Arnold, of course, took that very personally. So I think he was
probably right, by the way, you know.
Yeah. Because Arnold was training like 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, you know.
Yeah.
So I think Arnold wanted to come back. I think he was kind of missing the spotlight, maybe. Yeah. And I think he wanted to beat Menser. He wanted to beat Zane. He wanted to show everybody that he was still the king, you know, 5 years. Because, you know, we know Arnold's got a big ego.
Yeah. And you know, that's why he's so successful at what he does. So Arnold, when does he actually announce I'm doing the show?
He didn't. He didn't announce at all. So the day before the contest, they have a meeting, and Arnold comes in. And everybody's freaking out, like, what the fuck's he doing here? You know? So then they know that he's doing the show. Yeah. So the biggest problem was, since 1974, they started having 2 divisions in the Olympia. They had an under 200-pound class and an over 200-pound class. And I think Franco wanted that because Franco knew he could never beat Arnold. So now Franco had his own division, you know? Yeah. So Franco won that in 74, 75, and 76. And then 76, he won the overall. So they had it in 77, 78, and 79 also. Right. Well, the problem with the 2 classes was the under 200-pound class was usually stacked with a lot of competitors. And then the over 200 wouldn't have as many people. Yeah. But they would take 3 from each class. They would take 3 from the under and 3 from the over for the top 6. So a lot of times there were some guys in the under 200-pound class that should have been in the top 6, and they weren't in there. So Boyer Coe went to Ben Weider and he said, from now on, why don't we just have 1 class? No divisions anymore. That way we'll have the best bodybuilders in the pose down. So Ben Weider said, yeah, that makes sense. So they took a vote with all the competitors, and all 16 competitors said, yes, let's just have 1 class, except for Arnold. Arnold was the only one.
Why did he care?
I think his reasoning was he figured the better bodybuilders were guys like Dickerson and Coe and Zane. So if he beat Menser in the over 200, then he'd only have to face 1 guy for the pose down. You know what I mean? He wouldn't have to face.
I see. Okay. Strategy, he was thinking.
Yeah. So Boyer Coe was the one who suggested this. So Boyer Coe at the meeting said, well, Arnold, you know, tell us why you only want to have 1 class. You know, we all want to have, or why you want to have 2 classes. We all want to just have 1 class. What's your reasoning? Why do you want to have just 2 classes? Why do you want to keep having the 2 classes? So Arnold's sitting down, and he looks at him, and he goes, why don't you act like a man? Boyer Coe goes, what? So Mike Menser gets pissed off, and Mike Menser goes, hey, he's just trying to ask you a question. And then he goes, "Shut up, Menser." He goes, "We know you lost the Olympia to Zane last year because you let your stomach stick out."
Is that true?
Loses it. You know, Menser had a real slow metabolism. He had to starve himself for these contests, and I guess he killed himself for 1980 because he took second in 79. He figured 80 was his year.
Right.
So he killed himself for 1980. So he loses it. He gets up and he goes over to Arnold and he puts a finger in his face, and they start arguing. And everybody that was there said they thought there was going to be a fight.
Right.
It was that close.
And Arnold Menser was a nut. He probably would have taken Arnold out, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. And Boyer Cole told me that Menser was sitting, or Arnold was sitting down. So if Menser would have hit him, he would have took his head off.
Yeah, probably.
So I guess Bill Pearl got in the middle of them, and he stopped Menser, and then everything cooled down. So Arnold said So then after that, Arnold said, "All right, it's fine. We'll have one class."
Oh, so you think it was like a whole mental warfare against Menser to get him all riled up?
Riled up, and and throw him off,
So he was throwing everyone off by throwing insults out just haphazardly like that.
Right.
Gotcha. Meanwhile, it wasn't really affecting him emotionally at all.
Right.
So
now,
go ahead. Finish.
Boyer Coe and Mike Menser and a few other people said that was the first time they really saw Arnold nervous at a contest. They said backstage he was very nervous. And Samir Bannout told me that when Arnold was training in the gym, in World's Gym that summer, he looked fantastic. He was getting big, and it looked like he was going to, be almost like the Arnold of old. Mm-hmm. But I guess he hurt his shoulder because he only trained for 8 weeks. And when you have to push it that fast to try to get your gains, he ended up injuring his shoulder. And plus he trained with a lot of high volume and stuff. So he ended up taking a shot of cortisone before he left for Australia. Then when he gets to Australia, he's holding all this water. So Franco looks at him and he goes, "What happened?" And he goes, "I took a shot of cortisone." And he goes, "You idiot. Now you're holding all this water." So the night before the contest, the story goes, Arnold stayed up in his room all night posing for like 3 hours just to get this water out. Yeah. So Samir told me at the prejudging, he not only was down in size, I think he was only like 217.
Wow.
His legs were real thin. He had the chest, he had the biceps, but a lot of his other body parts, like his triceps were down, his legs were real down, and he was also holding water. So by the night show, I think he looked much better. And the day after the show, he took some pictures out by the Sydney Harbor, and he looks great. I think if he would have looked like that, there would have been less controversy.
Right.
So he was not only smaller, but he was also holding water.
Interesting. So I didn't know all that, those little gossipy details. Now, when he won, obviously Menser lost his mind, right? At that point?
Well, the other problem was the judges. A lot of the judges were friends of Arnold. And Arnold obviously had a lot of friends in bodybuilding, being the king of bodybuilding, and he was a promoter of the Olympia for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. So there was Reg Park, of course, who was his idol. He was one of the judges. Albert Busak, who was like friends with Arnold since Arnold was a teenager, he was one of the judges. Then there was an interesting story. They had a guy from Australia was supposed to be a judge. His name was Peter McCarthy. So Peter McCarthy was the chairman of the Australian bodybuilding before Paul Graham was. Paul Graham was the promoter, and Paul Graham was also the head. So Paul Graham took over from Peter McCarthy.
By the way, Paul Graham was probably one of the strongest men of all time. I used to be friends with his son. May he rest in peace. His son just passed the last couple of years. He said his dad used to climb up a telephone pole with a bear on his back. Did you know that?
Wow, no. I know he was a wrestler.
Yeah, Paul Graham was crazy, crazy strong, supposedly.
Wow. Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think Paul Graham didn't like Peter McCarthy because he took over the chairmanship from Peter McCarthy. So he told Peter McCarthy, the judges' meeting is at this time. So Peter McCarthy was going to go to the judges' meeting a half hour before just to make sure he was there. Yeah. All of a sudden, somebody tells Peter McCarthy, "Hey, the judges' meeting's going on now." He goes, "What?" And he's still got like a half hour to go. So he runs to the meeting. Paul Graham told him it was an hour later than when it really was. So now he's a half hour late. So then they replaced him. They put him on the panel, and he actually judged the show, but his score didn't count. And they put this kid in place who I guess had some controversy in Australia, and this kid loved Arnold. Right. So at the show, And I don't know if you remember back then, they had the point system. They didn't have the placement system.
Okay.
So instead of like today where you say this guy's first, this guy's second, you give him a 1, you give him a 2.
Right.
Back then they would score the guys up to 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be 20, 19, 18. But it wasn't like you would give the guy first 20 and then the guy second 19. You would just score like however you thought they looked. So if you got someone like Menser and Boyer Coe and Frank Zane and Chris Dickerson, these guys are all top-level bodybuilders.
Sure.
They might all get 19s and 20s.
Right.
All of them.
Right.
So this is where the scoring really got messed up. But this guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who replaced Peter McCarthy, he gave Arnold 20s in every round.
Oh.
So that really, really messed up the score, and that really gave Arnold favoritism. Plus, you had Albert Busak, you had Reg Park, you had these other guys who scored Arnold 19s, 20s in every single round.
Right.
And then I think the only one who didn't score Arnold high was Jacques Blumhardt from Belgium. He was the one who was, he gave it like really accurate scoring.
I would love to see what his scorecard read for all the competitors, to see what his final placings would have been.
Yeah, you can look that up online. I think he had Arnold like 5th.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And Dan Howard, who used to be a manager at Gold's Gym, he was also a judge, and he also scored Arnold low. I think he had Arnold in like 3rd or 4th, and Arnold didn't talk to him for like 5 years after that.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
The documentary they made about the 1980 Olympia, which I saw, in the way they put the footage together, at the night show, Arnold did look like the winner from the posing. Backstage, he didn't look good. But when you saw him up on stage hitting the poses, it was like, it was an illusion. Arnold knew how to hide his weaknesses, show his strengths, and it didn't look like he didn't deserve to win,
Right.
But I didn't see any prejudging, comparisons or anything like that.
Another really interesting aspect of that was CBS Television flew all the way out to Australia. They had a 3-year contract with the Mr. Olympia, and they filmed the contest.
Right.
When they got the footage back, now Arnold was booed at the end when he won. A lot of people booed.
Wow.
And when they got the footage back, they were really confused. They didn't understand why Arnold won, because even they could see, these people who knew nothing about bodybuilding, they could see Arnold didn't deserve to win.
Right.
So they called up Ben Weider, and they had the scorecards, and they said, we don't understand this. We don't understand these scorecards. And Arnold wasn't even hitting the mandatory poses. Like when they asked for a side tricep, he hit a bicep pose.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He did the thing like, what? What'd you say? I can't hear you. And then he just, oh, okay. And he hit a bicep pose.
He was bamboozling everyone. Yeah.
Right. So the producer from CBS was like, how can he score perfect 20s when he didn't even do the poses? That doesn't make any sense. They're looking at like ice skating, figure skating.
Right.
And they're like, you have to do the compulsory poses in order to score high.
Yeah.
He's not hitting the poses. How is he scoring perfect scores?
Right.
So they called up Ben Weider and they said, we got some questions before we air this. So Ben Weider sent Wayne D'Amelia to New York. Well, Wayne lived in New York. So he came there with his wife, and Boyer Coe was in town. So Boyer Coe went, and Chris Dickerson, and this guy Sherm Edwards was the producer of CBS Sports. He took them up into the thing, and he showed them the footage they had.
Right.
And Boyer Coe told me, he said, wow, you could really see Arnold didn't deserve to win. His legs were so skinny, and they could see it. And they were asking Wayne D'Amelia all these questions, and Wayne said, I don't know. I wasn't there.
It was like it was a testimony about the grand jury there. Yeah.
So 60 Minutes, also from CBS, was going to run an investigation on
No
why
way,
Arnold
really?
won. And they never did, but they were going to. They were looking into it. And then CBS Sports finally said, we're not going to run it. We can't run it. It's too controversial.
They pulled the plug. Wouldn't it be interesting that wouldn't it be nice if the real world took such an interest in the bodybuilding like they did back then,
Well, at that time, Dave, Pumping Iron came out in 1977, and that was the peak period of bodybuilding. Because when I got involved in bodybuilding, and I think it was in 1976, I remember everybody was saying all these old wives' tales about how bodybuilders are muscle bound and all the muscle turns to fat. They didn't know anything about the sport. Once the movie Pumping Iron came out, Arnold's book came out, Education of a Bodybuilder, everything started to change. People in Hollywood started working out more. Everybody loved bodybuilding. They were really looking up to it. This was before they knew about the steroid thing also, before they understood about steroids. And it was really gaining a lot of public acceptance. And there's a debate, there's a school of thought, I should say, that says that what happened in 80 and also in 81 kind of ruined it, because it was really going up. And you also had Frank Zane as Mr. Olympia. He was a guy that was very marketable because
yeah.
He was only 185, 190 pounds. Everybody loved his physique. The average man could look at him and say, I want to look like that, and he was a good-looking guy. So it really kind of put the damper on everything.
Who do you think, what according to like the experts back then, what were the placings, what should have they have been in most people's mind?
Arnold won, Chris Dickerson was second, Frank Zane was third, Boyarko fourth, Mike Mentzer fifth, and then there was a tie between Roger Walker from Australia, who was in great shape that year, and Roy Callender, and then Roger Walker won that tie, so he was sixth. So I think, if you go by a bodybuilding perspective, Chris Dickerson was the most finished, he was at his peak that year. He looked better that year than he won 2 years later in 82. Chris had placed sixth the year before in 79, but after that, he started winning all the Grand Prix shows. He won the Night of the Champions, and I don't know how he did it because he competed so much that year, but when he got to the Olympia, he was perfect. He was thick, he was ripped, his posing was fantastic, and Boyarko was also in the best shape of his life. Mike Mentzer supposedly was 10 pounds heavier than he was the year before when he only lost by 1 or 2 points to Zane.
Right.
And Zane looked good, but he was underweight. He lost too much weight from that accident, so I could see him not being at his best.
So you think Dickerson should have been Mr. Olympia that year, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think, they looked at the scorecards and they said if that Peter McCarthy would have judged and that other guy wouldn't have, Chris Dickerson would have won the show.
Wow. Interesting. I didn't know that, because everyone heard Mentzer, it was really, Mentzer really wasn't going to win the Olympia even if Arnold wasn't there, is what you're saying.
It's hard to say. I mean, if they would have had a different set of judges, Mentzer might have won. A lot of people felt he could have won. I think he was a little flat. I think, he maybe had to lose some water because he was another guy that was, I heard the story that he turned up the heat in his hotel room to like 100 degrees and he was posing. It was like a sauna in there and he was posing for like 2 days.
Oh my God.
He looked a little flat. I think if he would have kicked it a little fuller.
The crazy stuff people did back then, right?
I know. Now they just take diuretics.
Right, exactly. They pop a half a diet and they go to sleep,
Right.
Now in 81, obviously Arnold was done after 80. 81, Joe Weider talked Franco into coming back. After his 76 Olympia victory, he talked him back into coming in, making a comeback, even though he had that horrific leg accident and his leg didn't look good. I mean, people knew that. I mean, his one leg was definitely a lot smaller. And he was a guy who had great legs at his prime.
Well, Franco's legs were never really his best part. I mean,
they were good, though, John. They were a good body part.
Who?
Franco's legs were good. I mean, they weren't as good as his upper body, but they were still good. I mean, they were shredded.
Yeah, they were pretty thick, but they just never had the cuts, the definition. He always had a hard time getting the separation in the quads.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't Joe Weider that wanted him to do it. I think Franco wanted to do it after he saw Arnold win, because he was there with Arnold in Australia, of course, helping him out the whole way.
Right.
So then after that, they did start filming Conan in October, and Arnold got a part for Franco in the movie, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Where he's that warrior.
Yep.
And he jumps off the rock when they were filming it. He hurt his knee again.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, but then he started training again for the Olympia, and so he trained for it. So anyways, Boyarko, Mike Mentzer, Frank Zane, and Albert Beckles all said, we're not going in 81. We're boycotting the show, because they heard rumors that Franco was going in it. And they said, after what happened in 1980, we know Franco's going to win. It's guaranteed.
Wow.
So they were calling up the other bodybuilders, and they were trying to get everybody to boycott the Olympia. And Dickerson at first said he was going to boycott it, but then he figured, hey, I'm second, so I could win.
That's the problem with bodybuilders. They're too freaking greedy, right?
Right.
Hey, if he doesn't do it, I have a better chance of winning, that kind of philosophy.
So you know how it was with the magazines, Dave? It wasn't like today with the internet. It took months to come out that the Olympia in 1880 was very controversial.
Right.
Because at first I remember I was in the gym working out, and some guy comes in and he goes, hey, man, did you hear what happened? Arnold won the Olympia. I'm like, really? I didn't even know he was coming back. He goes, dude, it wasn't even close. He wiped everybody out.
Yeah, because there's no video footage to look at or even photos.
Right. Then we found out later it wasn't that close. It was very close. It was very controversial. And so 1981, everybody was on pins and needles. Everybody thought, man, if they screw this thing up again. And so everybody was like really, really nervous. And I went to it in 1981. I had really good seats. I think I was sitting like the 5th row, front and center.
Wow.
And I saw the whole prejudging. I saw the whole night show. So they all come out. There was 17 guys. And I could not believe there was 3 guys that were never high placing in the Olympia before. And they were in their absolute best shape of their life. And that was Danny Padilla, Tom Platz, and Roy Callender. They all 3 looked amazing, like unbelievable. So Franco comes out, and he looked good. He looked really good. His upper body was fantastic. You know, he had that big chest. His abs were ripped. He was probably one of the most ripped and hardest guys in the whole show. But his legs were definitely down. The thighs were there. It's not like he had skinny legs. Like Arnold had skinny legs the year before. Franco had thighs. His injured leg was still not in proportion, but he had no cuts in his leg at all. It was like they were puffy. You know what I mean? He had no cuts. Everything else was great. His upper body was fantastic. His arms were better than ever. His posing wasn't that great. His posing routine didn't get a lot of applause. But I think if you would have polled that audience after the prejudging, I think everybody in the audience would have said the top 3 was Platz, Padilla, and Callender. No doubt about it.
So you think Platz deserved to win that Olympia?
Yeah, I had Platz in first. I actually had Callender in second and Padilla in third.
Wow. That was crazy. So what happened? What was the ramifications after Franco won that year?
Well, first of all, it was the loudest booing I've ever seen in a show, ever.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
They called the top 6 out. They go through the pose down. Joseph Wilcox gets 6th. And then they announced Danny Padilla in 5th. And the place erupted. Went absolutely nuts. Boos, screaming.
Right.
Then they go to 4th. Callender gets 4th.
Yeah.
Again, the booing never stopped. It just started with Padilla, and it went all the way through to first. And then they gave Platz 3rd, and then it really got bad. And then by the time they got to Dickerson and Franco, most of the audience was leaving. They were like, fuck it, I don't even care who wins now.
Wow, really?
And then they gave Dickerson 2nd. Franco jumps up. Arnold and Joe Weider didn't even come out on stage. The place was, Dave, people were going into their pockets and grabbing change and throwing it at the judges.
No, really? Oh, my God.
They were throwing their programs at the judges. They were throwing change at the judges. It was insane. I never saw anything. I'd never seen anything like it since. It was incredible.
Now, do you think that year that, obviously we could talk about it because he's no longer with us. Do you think Joe Weider had something to do with that? You think Joe went and talked to the judges? Or do you think the judges were just so biased?
I think Joe wanted a fair result. I don't even know if Arnold had anything to do with it. But, I mean, again, they tried to get judges from all these international countries, But the thing with the Weiders back then was if you were a distributor for Weider products, like let's say in Japan or Australia, then Weider would make you the head of the IFBB for Japan.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he invited those people.
Right.
So they had a sign of, I don't know, there was another judge there from Italy who was a good friend of Franco, and it was kind of like the same thing with that guy from Australia. He gave Franco perfect 20s. And I think because of who Franco was, and I think this also relates to Arnold too, they were icons, they were legends, and they were coming back. So I think all the judges, they could place anybody from 20 on down to 14 or whatever. Yeah. And they always gave Franco and Arnold 20s and 19s just because of who they were. I don't think they realized that at the end of the day, when you added up all those points, Franco was going to come out ahead. And this one guy, Franco Fassi from Italy, he gave Franco perfect 20s all 3 rounds. Wow. And then that was the deciding factor. Now, if Franco Fassi wouldn't have been there, I think Platz or Dickerson would have won.
Interesting. Very controversial. And so who sat out that year?
Menser, because Menser never competed again after 1980. Zane didn't compete in 81, but he did come back in 82 and 83. Boyer Coe didn't compete, and Albert Beckles didn't compete.
Wow. That's a pretty good boycott. I don't think we've ever seen a boycott like that ever in the history of bodybuilding.
And can you imagine if those 4 guys would have showed up in top shape? That would have been one of the best
show.
Yeah, it would have been incredible.
Would have been a nutty show.
And Joe Weider and Arnold gave Franco his trophy backstage.
No, really? They didn't even come out?
If you look at the pictures of Franco with his trophy, they're all taken backstage. They wouldn't dare go out there.
Wow, what a crazy time. So you know what, people you think because Sean Roden can't, they're not letting him do the Olympia because of a rape allegation. I mean, that's really nothing crazy. I mean, if you think about it, the judging is pretty fair at these Olympias. You know, we could argue and about the minutia of who should have won or who did, but it's usually pretty good. I mean, they're usually pretty accurate. There might be one placing a little off or something like that, and that's controversial, but you never get like a really corrupt decision anymore.
No. Yeah. And I think, I think the internet has changed that a lot, because back then the audience could only voice their opinions through booing at a contest, you know, but now if there's a bad decision, the next day there's going to be all this stuff on the internet about how the judges made the wrong decision. The judges are going to take the heat. Sure. So I think you're right. It's way, way better now than it was. I mean, you can't get away with that stuff anymore.
Plus, Jim Mannion is very honest, and he's a Jim Mannion's a bodybuilder. A lot of people don't realize he's the president, but he's a bodybuilder. He competed. Right. He understands the sacrifice involved. So it's hard to fix a contest when you know you've done it yourself and how hard you work. So I think that Jim has done a very, look, they don't get every decision right, but he's done a very he's put a lot of time and effort into making sure that the judges on that panel know what the freak they're doing. And we're not going to get these wacko decisions. And you know what they did? They changed it. They actually get rid of the 2 high scores and the 2 low scores now, so that if you get a whack job on there who's giving perfect scores out to someone who doesn't deserve it, his score is discarded anyway. It doesn't even count. Yeah. So,
well, I think after 81 they got away. They were done with the point system. Yeah. And they went to the placement system, so that changed a lot of things too.
If you're a corrupt judge, you can still give Arnold the first place vote if he doesn't deserve it. But what it's designed to do is by taking the persons who are extremes, who maybe you don't like a competitor, and you put them last. That score gets dropped because they get rid of all the extreme scores, and whatever's left in the middle is what you wind up placing. And I think that really has done a world of difference. Obviously, in '82, then of course Dickerson won the Olympia. '83, we usher in the Lee Haney era. So
Samir won in '83.
Samir, and then the Lee Haney era after. Excuse me. Now I'm going to get Samir texting me now. That's Samir. But I mean, think about it. There really was a lot of flux in the bodybuilding world after Zane left and got out of that title. There was never the same Olympia guy. Every year it was changing hands, which I don't know. You were from that era. Was it exciting, or was it like a disappointment that you never knew who was going to be the Mr. Olympia?
Oh, it was extremely exciting. I remember going, because I went the 3 years that Zane won, and every year it was like I didn't know if Zane was going to win. Could he pull it off? I mean, Zane was a guy who he just pulled it off because he was so perfect in every aspect, and he had to be because he was giving away such a size advantage to these really big guys. Sure. And there was a lot of impressive bodybuilders at that time. So, but I thought he deserved every one of those titles that he won. I don't think anyone else deserved it. I think Zane really pulled it off. There was something about Zane when you saw him on stage. He just had that magic, you know what I mean? And he just really had that charisma, and he was just perfectly prepared. There was a time, I think it was the '78 Olympia, when he won his second one. They used to do a weigh-in, but they didn't do it on stage or anything. They had it in a separate room in the hotel. Sure. So the competitors had to come in, whenever they wanted. I guess it was a certain time period, and they had to weigh in. But they had to strip down, so everybody who was there would see them. All the other competitors were there, and a lot of the press was there and stuff. So when they first started the weigh-in in 1978, if I can get the story right, from what I remember, all the guys were standing around, and they're all looking at each other and waiting to see, maybe, should I take my clothes off? Zane comes in from the side door, takes his clothes off, weighs in, puts his clothes back on, and he's gone before anybody even knew what happened.
Oh, no way. Oh, really? That's great.
He was very smart, and Zane always had those dreams that predicted every year he would win. So.
Hey, you know what? He was a perfectionist, and you know what? He maximized his gifts and minimized his weaknesses, through relentless practice of what he was doing and his presentation, everything like that, and every detail that he paid attention to. And he beat guys he probably should never have beaten because of that.
Right. Yeah, Zane his wife used to take pictures of him every week as he was preparing for the show. Yeah. So they would go outside in the sunlight, and they would do it at the same time every day. Yeah. And he would study those pictures, and he said a lot of the pictures he looked like shit. But he said by the time he got to the show, he knew exactly what his body really looked like. And he said most of the bodybuilders who he competed against, they didn't have that same mindset.
Right.
They didn't
know. There was no digital pictures back then. Right.
Right. and they just looked at themselves in the gym, under gym lighting or whatever, but they didn't really see the pictures. They didn't really analyze their physiques like Zane did, and he really knew his body, and he knew exactly how to pose, and he knew exactly what poses he looked best in, and that's why he was able to win 3 years in a row.
Great stories about the 70s up until 1980. John, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I think maybe the next year we'll talk about the Lee Haney era, because that was a really exciting time too. 8 years there that Lee Haney held that title, and he had to beat some really good competitors during that time period. There was a lot of drama going on, especially in the initial stages of the Haney, Olympia wins there. So we'll focus on that maybe the next week or maybe after the Olympia, because I think a lot of people don't know much about that era as well. I find that no one has any history knowledge about bodybuilding except for these guys that do YouTube videos that read off of Wikipedia. But you actually have a lot of you have behind the scenes information that even I don't know, because you actually were there at these shows and you read all the magazines back then. So and you talk to people, which is good, because sometimes the magazines don't tell the whole story.
Right.
Well, John, are you going to be at the Olympia this year?
Yes, I'll be there with Old School Labs. I'll be hanging out with Samir and Platts, so we'll be out there. Yeah, we'll grab you guys again and bring you into the wrap-up with Chris Aceto, obviously, and Sid, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens this year. I won't be there, of course, because we just had a new baby, but I know you guys are going to do a great job. John, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for having me, Dave. It was great. All right, and guys, and that's going to take us to the end of another episode of RxMuscle's Iron Road to the Olympia 2019, brought to you by Chemical Warfare. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.